Hey there, all you friends, true believers, and newcomers alike. I'm Superfly Comics Guy, and today, for the Valentine season, I thought we'd take a look at a character ultimately driven by love, and that is Spawn, found here in the Spawn Origins Deluxe Edition Volume 2 from Image Comics. We'll do our usual routine, taking a look at the cover, the spine, the contents collected, the build quality, and a flip through of the book, where I can share some of my own thoughts, opinions, and recommendations. So, if you like what you see here, you know how to show it, and feel free to leave your own thoughts down in the comments below. But with that out of the way, grab your Valentine and let's go. Okay, so here we have the slipcase to the Spawn Origins Deluxe Edition. There's no variant covers or anything like that, but there is some variation in the edition that you can buy. This is the standard edition, I would say, but you can also buy a signed and numbered edition, and that'll have the signature of Todd McFarlane in it. So we have here, a lot of them are differentiated by just a different color in Spawn's eye there, his logo. So we got a red one here. Gotta be careful that the the book doesn't fall out as I'm showing you the spine here, which is right there. You got the number 2 there at the bottom, the volume number. And here on this side, you just have a mirrored image of the front cover. So right here, you can see that the cover price of the regular edition or the non-signed edition is $100 US, or I believe it's around $132.50 you can get in Canada. The signed edition, I believe, is a little more expensive, $150 US, or somewhere around $200 Canadian. So we can't do our typical snapping off of the dust jacket, unfortunately, because there is no dust jacket. Just have to take it off normally. But yeah, you have the exact same design on the hardcover here that you do on the slipcase. This glossy finish for Spawn's mask, but note that it's gonna pick up fingerprints like glue. They're just gonna stick to this thing. But still quite a nice design. So this is Image's Deluxe Edition, which is most comparable to DC's Absolute Edition. So I know it gets kind of confusing because DC also has a Deluxe Edition line, but they use that for their oversized hardcovers. It gets confusing. So just think of this as an Absolute Edition from DC. Image just calls it a Deluxe Edition, and it's a little bit bigger than an omnibus. This is really their cream of the crop format for presenting the pages as big as possible. Each of these Spawn Deluxe Editions from Image collects 25 issues of Spawn. So Volume 1 collected issues 1 through 25. So Volume 2 collects issues 26 through 50. But that's enough yapping from me. Let's dive in. Okay, so time for a flip through of the Spawn Origins Deluxe Edition Volume 2. Wow, we're immediately greeted with, like I said, the visual spectacle. This is gonna really present the artwork in the best possible format for you to admire. You got these big, thick pages, and as I said, collects issues 26 through 50 of the Spawn series. You have a credits page here, kind of a table of contents here. Not really, it just tells you where the different sections, how they're broken up. So you have the intro, all the issues, and then it jumps straight to some of your extras like, well, we'll cover that later. We'll cover the extra section later. So we have this introduction by Todd McFarlane, the series creator and co-founder of Image. A lot of accolades under that man's name. But he's talking here about how this format is so cool because each volume is kind of like a time capsule representing roughly 2 years of work on Spawn. And at this point, Todd McFarlane is still leading the charge, but Greg Capullo, Tony Daniel, and Alan Moore are also stepping in to help with the series by this time, which is pretty cool. He's talking about how Spawn is a character who is driven by his humanity and ultimately love. And, you know, some other bits about how this deluxe format is meant to be spectacular while also staying as true to the originals as possible. And yeah, right here, we're starting off right away. Just giant blown up artwork here. Let me quickly cover who Spawn is. I'm going to try to avoid spoilers as usual. I don't like to give away spoilers. But if you're not familiar with Spawn, you can definitely check out my review of Volume 1 of this series. But Al Simmons here was a mercenary killed in action, but then he was captured by the devil and brought back to life as a spawn of hell. So he's basically a dead man walking. He's horribly scarred. He's been bonded with this living costume and cloak, which is kind of funny because they actually refer to it a lot of the time as a symbiote. So part of me wonders if that's like intentional by Todd McFarlane, sort of, referencing his previous work on Spider-Man perhaps. Or maybe I'm just reading into things too much. But anyway, he's brought back to life, but time has moved on quite a bit. Quite a few years have elapsed since Spawn was alive, and he discovers that his world has kind of moved on without him. All he really wanted to do was reconnect with his wife Wanda, who's actually based on, I believe she's based on Todd McFarlane's actual wife, but she's now married to his best friend Terry, and that's a little disheartening for Spawn. He feels a bit lost after that, and he ends up finding a place among the homeless community, sort of as their protector. But Spawn's powers do come with a catch, a countdown timer. So every time he uses his powers, this countdown timer diminishes. And if it reaches 0, then he will be forced back to hell as a servant of the devil. So now you have this dilemma within this character. Does he hold off on using his power with the hope that he might one day be able to reconnect with his wife somehow? Or does he use his powers to protect the innocent, but then reduce the time that he is left on Earth? And, it's said that the devil will only choose someone to be a spawn if they have a great capacity for evil. But Al Simmons will repeatedly challenge that notion. You come to realize that there's more to him than just violence and vengeance. And that's sort of the basic premise of the story and the character, so you can already tell that there's a lot of complex storytelling potential with this character. Now, up until this point, I'd say he's been pretty conservative overall with his powers. He hasn't really been using them too often, as he's sort of just trying to figure out what to do next with himself. But however, all the while, he's been under attack by residents of hell, or demons, or warriors and angels from heaven even. It's hinted actually at quite a few times in this volume that there's a looming war brewing between heaven and hell, and that Spawn will have to eventually choose a side. So Spawn really can't catch a break. But the point is, what I'm trying to say is that Spawn realizes that he can't just sit around and do nothing. He's continuing to get attacked, and people are dying without his help. So he decides that he wants to use his power for something positive while he can. And speaking of power, it's during this time that Spawn's living costume begins to evolve and exhibit new behavior. So you'll get to see some new powers and lore revealed pertaining to how his powers work exactly. But generally, what you'll be getting in this book is that it's a lot of issues where Spawn is protecting the innocent and just socking it to some really despicable individuals. You'll have this deadbeat father who's abusing his kids, or you'll have Spawn going up against the KKK, basically. Also around this time, more villains are starting to appear. So you have the first appearance of the Curse and the Freak and Cygor and Tremor comes back from Volume 1. It's all very 90s. You learn more about the Clown and or the Violator. So it's starting to sort of develop its world a little bit more. But the other big plot thread that's going on throughout this book is that Spawn is trying to solve the mystery of who the heck is responsible for killing him in the first place. Now, originally, the answer seemed pretty cut and dry, but eventually you discover that there may have been and may be a larger conspiracy at play that involves those close to Spawn. And this conspiracy ends up being pretty far-reaching, affecting many characters, as there's some detectives in this book, Sam and Twitch, from the local police department, who are also looking into Spawn, but, they then also find themselves entwined in this conspiracy, and they start tracing it back to corruption in the police department, and then there's a whole, mystery that has to unravel there. So there's a lot going on. And as I said earlier, there's a lot of storytelling potential in this book. But does it always live up to that potential? Well, in my opinion, not really. I think this series' biggest strength is the art, for sure. I mean, just look at it. No, that's not to say the writing is abysmal or anything, but I wouldn't call it particularly amazing either. It's perfectly serviceable. It gets its story across, but it just kind of fumbles a little bit in its execution a lot of the time. Like, there's certain plot points like that countdown timer I mentioned, or that conspiracy that Spawn's trying to solve. You can tell they're being dragged out across as many issues as possible just to sort of keep the story going. There's a lot of exposition and narration that a lot of the time doesn't really add much. It mostly is just restating what you already see happening on the page. You can tell that crossovers with other series were starting to become more and more plentiful around this time. So it becomes a little bit harder to keep track of where Spawn has appeared and what has happened. But despite all that, the book, it knows how to have fun. Even though it can be pretty violent and delve into some pretty dark subject matter at times, it still delivers it in that, classic edgy but bombastic 90s way. For example, there's these TV personalities that are covering the events surrounding Spawn. So it's interesting because they all deliver the same story in 3 different ways. So you have this traditional newscaster up here who just gives you the facts. You have this reporter here who likes to sensationalize things a little more and, play things up for drama. And then you have the third guy, which is like a radical sort of reporter, conspiracy theorist who's, always spouting off. He's a little more provocative in his delivery. And it's kind of funny because every time he appears, there's a different station that he's on, almost as if, he appears for a short time at a station and then they fire him and then he appears on a different one. So I think that's kind of funny. Did I really find it that engaging? No. A lot of the time I would just sort of skim through these little news bits. But, it's kind of fun for what it's worth. There's even a fun Christmas issue in here where a kid confuses Spawn for Santa because he sees a silhouette in the night of Spawn fighting criminals. There's lots of little fun issues like that. It's not just, edgy and depressing. It knows how to have fun in that 90s way. But as I said, the primary reason you're here is for the art, and it really is unbelievable, especially in this giant format. There are some absolutely stunning spread pages in here. Plus, you get to see not just Todd McFarlane, but also some new names taking a stab at drawing Spawn, like Greg Capullo and Tony Daniel, who are obviously superstars in the industry by this point, by today. So it's really cool to sort of step back in time and see some of their earlier work. And even though the artists are changing, well, here and there, the art generally does a really good job of staying consistent throughout. And I was most impressed by Tony Daniels' take on Spawn. It really was quite the visual spectacle. But there's downsides to this giant format as well, because we're in the 90s, so every now and then you get some occasional sideways panels in here, and honestly, those are really inconvenient to read when the book is this size. There's also some goofs here and then with the writing. It switches between calling Spawn's costume made of necroplasm, and sometimes it's written as psychoplasm, and it can't make up its mind how much Spawn weighs. Like, so one time he's 400 pounds, or another time he's 500 pounds. Like, it sort of reminds me of the early Stan Lee days when he was writing Amazing Spider-Man, and he couldn't remember certain details, like Peter Parker's last name, for example. So it's kind of cool to see a little bit of that in here as well. But there also are some issues where certain bubbles are missing letters, and you kind of have to fill in the blanks yourself. So it's not perfect, but overall not too bad. Now for your extras section, you actually get quite a bit, which is nice to see. You have a black and white cover gallery, which is exactly as it sounds. It's just black and white versions of all the covers of the issues that are collected in here. So I'm not going to flip through all of these, but again, this format is really well suited to just displaying the magnificence of this artwork and the amount of detail that had to go into it. And that's ultimately why I ended up going for the deluxe edition, because I'm not like a huge die-hard fan of Spawn or anything, but I do quite like Todd McFarlane's work. So I figured I wanted to experience more of his artwork in that giant format. Here we have another art gallery, so just featuring snippets from the interiors. So not the covers, but some of the paneling or panels. And again, just absolutely spectacular stuff. You also will get some quotes from Todd peppered in throughout as you're flipping through this extra section. Oh yeah, you also have some colored versions as well, so even more spectacular. So you're definitely getting quite a hefty extra section in here. And then you also get here an afterword by Greg Capullo, one of the pencilers. And then that's it for your extra section. For build quality, in this edition, we have 620 pages. We have an absolutely fantastic eye there. And as we should, when you're paying a premium for this edition, this size of book, you really expect the build quality to be up to par. And you can see we're not getting any gutter loss here. This is one of those slightly annoying sideways panels, but you can see we're able to get pretty much no gutter loss here. And as frustrating as it can be to read these sideways panels sometimes, there's no denying that they look absolutely spectacular. The pages are glossy and nice and thick, so you're not getting color bleed or page bleed anywhere. The book lays over really well because of its weight. There's really no issues at all here. I know some of the earlier printings of this edition, people were reporting some binding issues, but this one seems pretty fantastic. All right, guys, the book is back in its slipcase, which means it's time to wrap up with some closing thoughts. And overall, I would say I had a good time with this. I don't think I enjoyed Volume 2 as much as I did Volume 1, purely because Volume 1 had that novelty of discovery to it. It was my first proper exposure to the character, so I was, learning about who he is exactly, how the world works, what drives him. So Volume 1 planted that tree, but Volume 2 is more about growing the roots, so to speak, expanding the world, fleshing it out, while pushing the overarching narrative forward, albeit a little bit too slowly at times for my liking. But if you're a fan of Spawn already, you probably already know about these editions. But if not, if you enjoyed Volume 1, then you'll probably enjoy this too. But by no means do you have to purchase these big deluxe editions in order to enjoy the series. This series has been collected in plenty of other formats as well, including trade paperbacks, softcover compendiums, standard hardcovers, obviously these deluxe editions. So there's plenty of options that can suit whatever your budget may be. But that's been my review of the Spawn Origins Deluxe Edition Volume 2. You let me know what you thought about the book, the review, the stories inside. Let me know what you're currently reading. Anything. If you have any questions, leave them down below. I'll be happy to help out. But thank you so much for joining me today. I hope to catch you in another video real soon, so you have yourself a great day. I've been Superfly Comics Guy, and until next time, you keep reading. Bye-bye, guys.